So, for some of you, we've been doing research for actually over a year and a half. I'm trying to understand the inside of what's happening in the future. And it's absolutely essential that we understand this, because as most of you know, we spend millions of dollars every single year on making sure that our workforce is positioned. So we've asked these folks to kind of join us today for a conversation, and we didn't have to twist arms. It was kind of nice. They were seriously excited about joining us. So I'm going to ask them some questions, and then when we're done, we're going to open up questions to the floor. So as we're talking, think about what it is you need to know from them. And I've shared with them, this is an amazing audience. This is an audience of professionals who work in this space. So whether or not you know this or not, all of you who are in this room are invited here because you're absolutely essential to our work. So think about your role. So I'm actually going to start with Zach. Zach, Alliant Energy has chosen to make serious investments in the alternative energy space. What does that mean for your industry, and what impacts are you looking for?
Oh, I think it has tremendous long-term impacts. 2 years, Alliant Energy is going to be 100 years old. There's never been a time where there's been more change in our industry than there has the last couple of years, and that we expect over the next several. We see the biggest drivers for our investments are really, we don't want to be the next Blockbuster, we don't want to be the next Kodak. We're hearing more and more about how technologies are changing our industry, and those technologies are changing what our customers want too. We're hearing from our customers that they no longer just want they hear from us when they get their bill in the mail every month. They want us to give them more options, more choices, cleaner options. And technology is really driving that. We've seen the price of solar energy come down 70% since 2007. There's enough solar energy across the country to power about 4.8 million homes. We expect that to double over the next 2 years. We see battery storage economics improvements. Battery storage is the holy grail for renewables. If they get battery storage right, that can really mean big things for the industry, allowing folks to store renewable energy during the day and not have to worry about if it's a cloudy day or if there's snow or even nighttime, so as that video kind of showed. So we have to do it. We have to make smart choices. We are making significant investments in alternative energies sources. We're trying to learn about them ahead of time so the future doesn't come up on us all of a sudden. The project manager for a lot of our big construction project at our Madison headquarters, Rick Zimmerman, is here, and we have over 1,000 solar panels at our Madison headquarters. We're putting in a 30 kilowatt hour storage, battery storage. We've got 13 EV chargers, and none of those technologies are new, but we're trying to learn how they integrate together and kind of how they could present a better future for our customers, so we can be trusted advisors for our customers to stay ahead of the future and to learn. It'd be very easy as far as to say, we're in Wisconsin, that future that was on the video, that's not going to happen here. There's snow, there's not a lot of sun, but we know it'll get here at some point. We've got to make smart investments ahead of the time, because our customers are going to want it. We want it too.
Thank you. Steve, I think of you as the inventor here, so just so you know, that's whether that's a myth or not, that's how I think. There's a lot of pressure here. Can you tell us what you do and where in the innovative space you work? Help us use our imagination.
Sure, I'll try. Is this working? My company is mostly in the product development space, so we're working with companies that are developing products, bringing these things to market, and really engineering and design firms that work around that space. So local companies that you would know would be Sub-Zero, Truck Bicycle, Harley Davidson, companies like that. We also work with much larger companies, Boeing and Tesla Motors, and very, very large companies. But on the flip side of it, there's very small companies, inventors and researchers and hobbyists. Basically, anyone that needs to take something off the screen and get it in their hands, bring it to life, get that first prototype, get the first few production pieces, bring something into reality. We work a lot with product development and design firms locally, companies like Design Concepts, Bjorkson, Bit7, Inform Product Development. Many of you may know that they're great local companies that make up a nice segment of our business. What's next is the big question, and I made a statement recently that I see this being a lot like the Apple platform, the iPhone platform in 2009 when they launched the App Store. And they said, okay, we've developed this platform, it does these things, and now we need all of you to figure out what to do with this. What's next? What are the applications? What are the needs? It was a brilliant move by Apple, and the 3D printing industry is nowhere near as organized as that, but the technology has been developed to a point where, you know, it kind of has existed for a while at a stable state. We know what it can do, and now it's up to everybody else to tell us what to do with it. So that will drive a lot of requirements, a lot of innovation around CAD software, medical imaging, material science, you know, the list goes on and on as we develop more and more uses of 3D printing.
We also read the In Business magazine article where I think, are you even in some of the medical space of prototyping?
We're working on that, and I should mention I brought a bag of parts along because sometimes it's very hard to explain, so they're over there if anyone wants to look at things afterwards. And in that bag we have a model of a spine that we printed a couple weeks ago. It's a spine of a 6-year-old girl, and it was for a surgery at the Nemours Children's Hospital in Wilmington, Delaware. So the lead surgeon wanted a model of the spine because it was a teaching surgery where he had 12 additional surgeons observing. And he wanted this to be able to hand around so they could understand the deformity, the issues. So any medical image, not any medical image, but any CT or MRI scan can be converted into the appropriate file for 3D printing. So that's an area we hope to grow our business into. There's tremendous opportunity and tremendous human impact as well. So.
Wow.
Sometimes the challenge is just figuring out where to focus your efforts.
Still wow.
Yeah.
Joe, what is telemedicine? What is not? What is it? What is it not?
Well, you saw the map in Pat's presentation. Telemedicine is basically patient care provided at a distance. So let's say you have this wonderful spine, and it's at some location where that surgeon is not. But you have the technology for that surgeon who, let's say, is in Boston, Massachusetts, and you've got somewhere in Wisconsin, you've got this spine and a physician with the technology to be able to be the hands for that surgeon in Boston. So that's just one example. I don't think we're necessarily doing that yet here in Wisconsin, but if you want to think about the future, that's possible. So telemedicine can be provided ICU, the intensive care unit. You may have in a nursing setting where you've got a nurse looking in or the physician looking in on a patient in person, whereas in telemedicine, you've got someone looking at that screen 24/7. So in many ways, what you can do through telemedicine through a distance can even be more intense and more quality because of the amount of time that they're able to spend. One of the early adopters of telemedicine was psychiatry. My background is in behavioral health, and I would have thought that the last people to say you could do care at a distance would be counseling of any kind because of that patient and patient rapport. But through the television and through the screen, it becomes like you're just there. So telemedicine, as I said, is care at a distance. It can also be like teleradiology, where your screens can be read by a radiologist who never interacts with the patient, but interacts with the tests and the results. So anything that you have in medicine, you can do pretty much in telemedicine. You can do ICU, dermatology. You need high definition screens, and you need reliable internet and broadband to be able to do these things. But basically anything you can do in person, you can do through telemedicine. It's provided by the same providers at a distance that you would have in the room with you. Although, as we talk about workforce, there are opportunities for that in-room person who will help coordinate the technology and the patient flow through that might be different in the future. One of the things I would say telemedicine is not is just a solution for rural. I represent rural Wisconsin healthcare, but while it's a great way to look at workforce realignment where it's needed, if you don't have enough of those surgeons who can put those spines in, you don't have enough of them no matter what. So it's not just a solution for rural, although it can be. It's also not as expensive as it used to be. Like most technologies, as time goes on, it becomes less expensive to do and less sci-fi, if you will. And so even at the co-op where I work, we're doing a telemedicine project where we've got 4 rural communities who have capacity in their behavioral health providers that are working with 4 other rural communities who need those mental health and behavioral health providers that are working together, that are not spending the $10,000 to $20,000 on machines that they did, even 10 years ago or even 5 years ago when I put that map together. That technology is not as expensive. It's also it's not possible. Telemedicine is not possible if you don't have adequate, reliable broadband. So I was just telling my table mates here that where I live near Spring Green, we live out in the hills, and I have to have a landline because my cell phone doesn't work at home and my internet's really slow. So you have to have those kinds of reliable sources, and it has to be all throughout the state. In some of the more rural areas, that's, believe it or not, here in medicine, it is still a challenge. The other thing I would say that telemedicine is not is that it doesn't replace the human connection. So if you've been in a healthcare appointment lately, you know you want someone there to give you the news, to talk with you, to walk you through that process. So it's not a replacement for in-person or any of those skills that are so critically important.
Jim Schrader, member, broadband. Steve, when we read about 3D printing, there's a great deal of literature about how 3D printing will have a huge impact on small businesses. How do you see the benefit to small businesses?
Well, I absolutely believe that hype or that line of thinking. We have several customers that we do production parts for with our 3D printer to make their production parts. And in the case of one company, we build a small bracket or a small cube that holds 6 GoPro cameras on it, and you can film a 360-degree field of view. So it's clearly a niche product. We make 50 to 100 a month, which is very low volume. They are constantly developing the product because GoPro will change their camera just like Apple changes their iPhone. So they don't want to invest in tooling to do a large production run because they don't have the volume and they don't have the stability of the design. So by 3D printing, if the design changes tomorrow of the camera, they can design a new bracket to hold it, and they email us a new file that we print from the following day. And really no harm to anyone involved. It's a very quick changing, very dynamic process. And that business, it's a small business out of New York called Freedom 360, and they sell the bracket, they sell the software to stitch all the images together, kind of a whole complement of solutions for people that need or want this video ability. They wouldn't exist without 3D printing. There's no economically viable way to make what they're making, get the functionality they want without 3D printing. And it gives them the flexibility to exist, with a very low financial footprint because of the lack of any hard tooling or investment in real infrastructure.
It brings new meaning to overhead, and where overhead isn't such a competitive factor.
Yeah, and the turnaround times are so quick that we can make parts, shipped to them within a matter of a few days. Whereas if they were dealing with traditional manufacturing, they may have to schedule out much, much further than that and commit to much larger purchases. So very flexible, very dynamic business model, and it's something that we see with, not only in our business, but there's websites all around the world that are enabling this sort of, innovative, entrepreneurial type design it, print it on demand, and sell it as the orders come in. Business model.
Zach, the video from British Gas really speaks to the impact of energy on our lives, with technology being a big part of the puzzle. How will this change the work or skill needs of your future industry?
Yeah, I felt kind of guilty because you kind of gave me the questions beforehand, and so I was thinking about this last Friday morning, actually, and I was thinking about the the worker that was on the video and said, you know, it was kind of the easy thing. Well, they're going to have to be more tech savvy. They're going to have to be able to integrate all these new technologies and different skills to do that. But then, kind of late that afternoon, I ran into a lineman who, just recall, sort of the first time I had met him was 2 years earlier when we were having a really brutal winter here in Wisconsin. And the day I met him was the day after he had spent a whole Sunday afternoon shipping through 12 inches of ice at one of our power plants to try to get the ice off of a valve at our Riverside power plant. And, you know, it just occurred to me that, boy, we probably won't need as many new skills. We'll just need a lot of workers like him. Our workforce today, they spend years training. And I'm convinced that whatever kind of new technologies we have, they're going to be committed to learning how to integrate those new technologies. We just need to find the same ones with those kind of work ethics. And I don't think they're going to have to change as much. I think as a company, we're going to have to change too. We're going to have to allow perhaps some of our future workforce to be more creative and to do some innovative things. And how do we attract them and kind of unleash their ability to do this sort of thing? So I'm sure there will be new skills, but I'm just hopeful we can find a lot of workers like we have today that are willing to do new things and train and do things safely. So.
But Zach, you're using a key word, new things.
Yeah.
Willing to do new things. So, and we tell our staff that's out in the field, you know, helping people understand that actually being a risk taker and willing to push the edge a little bit for their personal selves is a really big deal. And you're saying, do you have those skills? We can probably train you. But you have to start there, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, for us, we're a regulated utility. It's kind of like if we follow the same formula every year. You know, we go into work from 8 to 5, so follow the formula, produce safe, reliable, clean power. That's how we make money, and things seem to work. But we know technology is changing. Our customers want new things. The world around us is changing. We're going to do things in different ways, and we're going to have to maybe free up our workforce to take more risks, to be able to try new things. And you know, some things we're not going to get right away. In the past, we may have avoided doing things that we're not good at or present a new risk for us, but we're going to have to try new things, experiment, fail, much like you two probably do every day. We're not used to that. We're going to have to have workers. Maybe that's the new skill is risk takers.
Okay, Joe. You shared with us that telemedicine is already impacting a broad range of health careers. We showed you the wheel. What do you expect patient support will look like in a telemedicine environment? You know, when you said, you know, the people are still being an important factor, what do you think that's going to look like?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know about any of you, but when I watched the video that Pat played, I thought, oh God, somebody's going to have to come into my house and help me. You know, just set my thermostat every day. I just got really scared. So I think that, you know, as we think about patients in the middle of all this technology, you're going to need somebody who's really comfortable with that. And I always love seeing young people in the room because I know that they're the hope of our future. They're tech unafraid. So being able to just deal with the technology and learn it and help navigate. So if you want to use the word navigator, that might work. Patient coordinator. In some cases, it will still need to be a nurse person in the room, but it may not necessarily need to be an RN or a nurse practitioner. It may be someone who can practice at the top of their license, a certified nursing assistant, to be able to navigate the patient in and out of the room and things like that. I also do a lot of work with rural hospitals around customer service, as everybody is doing in every business. So I think the workforce of the future in this role needs to be technologically strong and service-oriented so that that patient interaction is still a positive experience, because you know, one of the things that telemedicine can do is allow people not to have to travel far, the patient to not have to travel for their care. So you still want to attract that patient, and so you want someone with those strong technical skills and the customer service skills. So it may be a new position. Obviously, everybody in this room knows healthcare has been changing a lot, and many people need help navigating through the system just as it is today. If you add a layer of technology, I think looking at care coordination is a big part of that, and then just the navigation through the use of those tools.
So Joe, follow-up, do you think that telemedicine will at least relieve a little bit of the rural healthcare provider shortage, or is that a myth?
Oh, well, I don't think it's a myth. So, for example, the group that we have, and I wrote down the names of the communities that we are involved here. We've got Toma, Dodgeville, Lancaster, and Baraboo. So you know those communities who have behavioral health providers who have capacity. So they are working with Prairie du Chien, St. Croix Falls, Baldwin, and Ashland, for other rural communities who need those behavioral health services. And what's nice about that is that sometimes in the rural areas, recruitment is a challenge because you don't necessarily have a full-time position for a radiologist, a psychiatrist, or whatever it may be, but you need some of that time. So this way people can partner up and meet the needs that are in that community that might not be a full-time position. So it does help with that, absolutely. And there's what we call the maldistribution. So everybody graduates from UW-Madison and wants to work here, right? And it's a wonderful place. But we also need people in the rural areas. So when we can partner up like that, it definitely can be a solution for them.
Okay, I have a couple of general questions for all of you. The first one is, do you envision that there will be a whole new category of jobs to support the technologies in your industry? Or maybe start with Steve.
Yes, definitely to support our industry, but kind of like I touched on earlier, the material science, software development, engineering, just medicine, medical imaging, all those people will be touched by 3D printing in some way, and there's going to be sort of niche opportunities everywhere to get involved and to learn new skills, to learn new opportunities. I think Joe touched on customer service being, people need to be technically savvy, but the flat organizations that we have now and the sort of the pace at which people move from job to job, whether it's company to company or within an organization, being able to communicate across teams and have those customer service skills will be important there.
Think about you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. A couple of years ago, green jobs were kind of the hot term, and we heard a lot about that. I think we've just come so far so fast since that was kind of the hot term. Because, as far as utilities go, a lot of the utilities are just doing the right things with the imprinted environment now. There's just so many jobs that can be classified as green. But I think one thing you'll see utilities doing more and more of is trying to find smart workers that can really get a hold of analytics. Our customers are saying, like I mentioned before, they just don't want the bill from you. It's kind of like the old Henry Ford Model T joke. You can have any color Model T as long as it's black. It's kind of how customers look at us. You get the same product every time, but ours want different things. Some want all wind power. Some want all solar. They want different things, and we're going to have to really do a better job, I think, on energy analytics, customer analytics, and I don't know what that category is going to be, but I know we have to do a better job.
In the British Gas video, you really got the sense of a worker who has to be high technology.
Yes.
In the energy. So, that almost feels like that's a given. It's probably a given now, right? But I'm assuming in the future it's like a deal breaker.
It's going to have to be. So you kind of made a joke about the thermostat. I had to hire somebody to come and install my desk thermostat, so I think we're going to have more folks that are tech savvy. But it's hard to tell if there's going to be a new category, or if that'll just kind of natural evolution. Yeah.
Joe, how about you?
Besides what's been said, I think for hospitals, clinics, home health, seniors don't. The idea of most baby boomers is not the future in a nursing home. It's being at home. So some kind of home health assistance with technology for monitoring so that people can stay in their homes. Certainly IT support. I think the other thing that's a little bit different than maybe telemedicine is the use of data in healthcare. Most hospitals, all hospitals are working on population health. So everybody in this room gets a Fitbit, right? And you go take your steps, and we can monitor your heart rate, and we can monitor your data, and we know the health of our community, or we can learn the health of our community. So what are we going to do with that? So the use of the gathering of data, the use of data, how are we going to make our healthy communities even more healthy? So how do we get involved in that data aspect? And creating of apps. Even your electronic health record, when you're in the hospital, they're typing into the computer, and someone wants to give you a medicine and the computer will pop up and say, this might be not a good idea. Maybe it doesn't say it quite like that, but a contraindication of your medication and something else. So there's already those kinds of things happening, but it's allowing people to provide health in that way as well.
So Joe, stay with you. How about the 2 essential skills the future workforce in your industry you think they would need? The two tops.
Oh, it was so hard. I was going to create chaos and have everybody just turn to a neighbor and say, what do you think the 2 are? But I think creativity has to be one of them. Did I take one first? So then I get another one. So service orientation will remain at the heart of healthcare. For sure, but then I think also the adaptability. So I just want to say one other thing about the balloons you saw on the telemedicine sites. When they did that study, what I found is the people that were successful, that went out and bought the machines for telemedicine and were actually doing it, when they said one of their secrets to success is they had someone who had a vision of the change and could lead that change and stay passionate about it. So I really think that has to be a part of it too, is that you have to be excited about this and passionate about it.
Steve, how about you?
Well, there's been a lot of sort of angst and hand-wringing over the last couple decades about the disappearance of vocational and technical education shop classes in our high schools. And if you're 3D printing anything, whether it's human tissue or a prototype part or a concrete house, you're making something physical. We need people that can still work with their hands. There's a lot of technology involved, there's a lot of computers involved, of course, but the end product is something tangible. And we kind of ebb and flow with difficulty finding people that have some basic experience, hands-on experience. I'm all for AP classes in high schools and all of that. There's got to be a balance with people that can still physically do something. So that's important. And then, as we touched on earlier, the communication skills, the customer service skills. It's interesting in this world of social media and everybody being so social, as long as they're looking at their phone. But I try to get, sometimes I try to get someone to follow up with a customer, and they'll default to email as opposed to picking up the phone. And I guess my point is, if you have an engineer telling you that the communication is bad, you know, that's kind of the things we're looking for.
That's really true. Zach?
Yeah, I think we touched on a couple, more risk-taking. I think we definitely be a part. More innovative employees, I think, is going to be the key. I'll just tell a little story here. About a year ago, there's a sense among our company, we need to get a better sense of how these technologies are evolving, how we need to change to give our customers what they want. And so why don't we just challenge our employees, to come up with some great business ideas or some solutions to a couple of these different areas that we were looking at. Kind of, Google or Apple or somebody else, typical non-electric utilities would do. And I got some pushback, and they said, we're not like those companies, Zach. Our employees aren't going to like to do this. So I thought I'd have a hard time getting 7 or 8 employees to kind of take part in this innovation challenge, we called it. And we got an overwhelming response. We got 110 employees. They worked on their own time. They came up with about 74 initial ideas. They whittled them down, refined them, and the executive team ended up agreeing to 7 of them at the end of the day after only 2 months. It was really amazing to see. Some of the ideas at the start were pretty crazy, and we thought, this will never work. But then they refined it. It was really amazing to see the evolution of the ideas and how things that we thought were crazy at the start turned into really good business ideas. 3D printing was one of them that the initial reaction was, boy, we're not going to be 3D printing for our industry until we had somebody who worked at our Columbia Power plant that said, boy, when we take the plant down to do repairs, a lot of times we're spending a couple extra $1,000 to rush a part here because as long as the plant's down, it's cost us money, but we've got to rush it, we've got to pay the extra money. And he said, boy, if we had a 3D printer, we could make a special wrench without having to wait. And it just kind of kept going and going. And so a lot of good examples there, but really for us, it was just giving our employees the space and opportunity to be more creative, be innovative, and that wasn't really on them. That was kind of more on us. The skills are there.
So I just want to say Zach meets Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to turn this over to the audience for just 2 questions. So Seth has a roving mic. So are there any questions out there? Any burning questions? You have these guys.
My question is selfish. Will residential solar power, is residential solar power practical from an individual?
It's getting cheaper and cheaper. The economics of solar power continues to improve. I think I mentioned it's come down to 70% installation costs since just 2007. Module prices are continue to go down, but we're seeing some of the other system costs continuing to decline. There's some discussion about how many rooftops can really support solar, and we've got some customers that want to, I have an apartment, or I've got my house, my roof, or my housing association will allow it. And we're looking at ways to do more community solar, so building larger solar installations and letting people buy into it. And this makes a lot of sense for people like me. I want to be greener, and I just don't want to put it on the roof. For me, it looks like braces for my house, but I love solar electricity. I want it. My wife would say that I don't like long-term commitments, but it's one of those things I think we'll continue to see the price come down. We'll see customers being more comfortable with the technology. We'll see utilities and others really installing a lot more meters come in different ways too. Things we can really think about today. Finance.
We've talked about 3D printing for companies. Do you see a future for 3D printing in the home? Let's say for commodity products. Why should I buy plastic plates, plastic forks, plastic knives? Would the day come when I would just print them at home?
That's a hot item, or hot topic. I guess the way I've answered that a number of times is, do you change your own oil? You can buy everything you need to do that. It's easy to do, relatively. Most people don't. And you can buy a 3D printer for your home. A lot of people have them. I know a lot of people that do. At this point, it's kind of a novelty. Whether it will ever become practical, so the hurdle, to back up a step, the hurdle is, the printing is the easy part. The designing is the hard part. Coming up with that CAD design of whatever widget you want to reproduce or make, and feeding that to the printer. So that takes, in times past, an engineer, an industrial designer, a mechanical design technician, someone with some fairly advanced knowledge and skill set to do that. So a lot of people that buy 3D printers, don't understand that hurdle, and that's why a lot of them are collecting dust. Now there's many companies working on making that easier to do, making that much more user-friendly. So ultimately there will be wider adoption of it. Will we see one in everybody's home making all the things that they can go to the store and buy? No. People still like to shop. Even if you can make it yourself, you still like to shop. You still like to earn that money, spend that money, and that's a human experience that will be difficult to replace as well. So.
Okay, well with that, thank you to these guys. Can we have a big round of applause?